Well, good morning, everybody. My name is Peter, and I'm the pastor here at Hope City Church. We're glad that you guys are here today. You picked a great Sunday to join us. If I haven't had the chance to meet you, I'd love to meet you outside after service today. Just stop by, say hi, introduce yourself. Honestly, like Mark said, I want to echo that at Hope City, we love making connections with one another. We think that relationships are key and just fundamental to everything that we're doing. But I want to welcome you back to week 5, and actually our last week of this series called Fixer Upper. We've been learning from a spiritual giant by the name of Nehemiah and investigating what it takes to restore what's broken in your life, what it takes to kind of fix up some of the areas in your own world. As you know, Chip and Joanna Gaines, this is that incredible couple. They had a TV show called Fixer Upper for many, many years on HGTV. They would take rundown Texas homes and they would restore them. They would kind of remodel them beyond even what they ever once were, quite honestly. They worked their magic. They kind of flexed their creative and skill, their design muscle, their skills, and they would turn things that looked a little bit like this into something that looked just like this, right? Like, I'm not sure that that's calling my name, but this one right here, I'm like, yes, sign me up. I could go move into that house, right? That's beautiful, and you got to imagine that the inside of that house is absolutely gorgeous as well. And this is what can happen, right? Like, we've watched these shows because it helps us understand what could potentially be. And, you know, throughout this series, we've been asking one very simple question. The question that we've been asking, and answering in our own hearts and our minds is this: what breaks your heart? Like, what in your world feels a little broken down or feels a little run down? It needs a little TLC. See, Nehemiah has a story of epic proportions, a story of rebuilding an entire city, the walls of a city in only 52 days. And we've been thinking, like, imagine what could God do in your life and in my life when we build according to His leading, according to His plan. You know, I don't know if you've ever been checking out at Target or, maybe even Publix, and you see those magazines, you see like Dwell or Better Homes and Gardens or even Magnolia Journal, and you look at that and you're like, that's not that hard. Like, I could do that. I could kind of whip together a project around the house real quick, and you get inspired to do a fixer-upper of your own. Well, I had that same thing happen. Several months ago, we started to find water in the hallway of our bedroom, right? And maybe our house was telling me, hey, it's time for a fixer-upper. Because I posted this picture on Instagram about 3 months ago. Generally speaking, this isn't how I like to start a Saturday morning, right? Cutting the ceiling open, pulling out old insulation, wet insulation, removing all that stuff because the roof above this started to leak, and it was just coming in almost every storm. And I was tired of mopping it up. See, I'd been dealing with this we've lived in the house about 3 years. So I've been dealing with it for about 3 years. And I realized it's probably time to get to the bottom of whatever this issue is, right? See, this is really just reflective of things that are going on in your own life. There are things that you deal with for 3 years, 5 years, 30 years, and you're like, okay, today's the day. Like, it's time. Let's just rip this thing open. Let's figure out what the problem is. And so in this situation, I actually had to call a very skilled roofer to come in and check it out. And he said, this is really your issue. Look at this picture here. So he rips it off, and he goes, right there. That's the spot. There was a gap in between the plywood that was about as wide as my thumb, and all of the water that was running down from these shingles that were improperly put down on the top, the water was just coming in and finding its way home, right into my hallway. See, this happens all the time, right? Not necessarily your roof, but in your life. You're finding gaps in your life, in your world, where you're like, something just isn't lining up, it isn't right. And here's what I know to be true, though. Right, like we've solved this problem. Look at what Nick did. He did a fantastic job. He blended it all in, whatever. And it hasn't leaked one time, not ever. Like, it's perfect, bone dry. But let me tell you about the inside of the house now. Okay, this is as far as I got. I put a little bit of sheetrock up, one coat of spackle, and I left the light just like that in case I was going to come back and spackle it again, right? 3 months later, I'm still walking by this exact thing. Like, if you were to come to my house today, it's going to look just like that because I took that picture last night. and so here's the deal, right? Like we know that there's gaps, there's holes, there's leaks in your life, that you go to fix it and repair it. And for whatever reason, we don't always see it all the way through. We don't always finish the job. We don't always get to the other side of that project. See, it's easy to start something. It's hard to finish something. It's hard for me to get motivated because I walk by that every day. I don't even notice it anymore. It's like I don't even see that because I'm not seeing a puddle on the ground. I'm not feeling that pain any longer, and for whatever reason, it just doesn't cross my mind. So when I asked in week 1, what was broken in your world, or what breaks your heart, and what causes you to want to do more, a lot of you could have really just written something down right off the bat. You could have flipped those notes over, and you could have said, this is what breaks my heart. This is what moves my heart to action. You could identify it. For some of you, there was a relationship in your world that you needed to repair. Whether that was with a son or a daughter or a sibling or a parent, you could identify that there was something that needed to be repaired. Some of you would have said, well, for me, it's that the foster care crisis. There are way too many kids that wake up that don't have a home a place to call home, that don't have parents to look up to care for them, and the foster care crisis breaks my heart. Or, maybe some of you would even say, well, for me, it's my personal finances. I need to kind of ratchet my personal finances back in, and we need to make some adjustments here. These are good things. In fact, I would say that the things that break your heart are God-sized things. But good things, many times good things may have burdened your heart. God may have given you this thought of like, man, I've got to do this. Like if I don't do this, I'm actually disobeying God. And you knew that the relationship was going to require like some really hard conversations. You knew that in order to fix it. You knew that in order to foster kids, you were going to have to take classes and kind of get your house all set and ready. And to fix your finances, you might even have to find an additional job. You could identify the issues, and you maybe even knew what to do in order to solve those issues. And yet there's something that prevents you from moving forward and seeing that fixer-upper all the way through. Why? Because we know that something is easy to start, and yet it's hard to finish. But here's what we have to learn. We've got to learn that when God gives you like a God-given dream, we have to move beyond just good intentions. We have to move beyond the like kind of pat answers of, yeah, I'll probably do something about that. We have to move beyond just that thought of, oh, that would be good, to one day go do that. We actually have to put our faith into action. We got to step into those and live out those God-sized dreams that he's given you, that he's put on your heart. And this is exactly what Nehemiah did. This is exactly what this man of God did. In Nehemiah chapter 6, we see that even though it's easy to start and it's hard to finish, it is possible. Nehemiah reveals this to us in chapter 6, which is page 332 on the Bibles around you. I want to invite you to turn in those Bibles, or maybe you brought your own Bible today. See, Nehemiah started out with this epic quest, this literally God-sized movement of rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. They'd been torn down and broken for over 140 years. This city lived inside of this perimeter of rubble. The gates were burned. The hinges were, a mess. The walls were broken down. Everything about this was a disaster. And Nehemiah said, something has to be done about this. Something has to be done about it, and it may as well be me to do it. See, then he ran into a whole another set of problems. He ran into some haters and some critics and some spiritual enemies who wanted to stop the progress that he was making. And these guys, 3 guys particularly by the name of Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, they attacked Nehemiah to keep him from finishing the job. And the bottom line, the things that we understand is that the closer you get to the finish line, the harder the enemy will fight to stop you. The closer you get to being done with something, the harder that enemy is going to push against you and prevent you from going all the way through and seeing it to the end. In Nehemiah chapter 6, we're going to see how to fight to the finish and figure it out, how to see God's dreams come to fruition and see his plans actually take place in your life. So look with me on the screens or in your Bibles at Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 1. It says, when word came to Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem the Arab, and the rest of our enemies, that I had rebuilt the wall, and not a gap was left in it, though up until that time I had not set the doors and the gates. Sanballat and Geshem sent me this message. And the message was simple. It says this: "Come, let us meet together in one of the villages on the plain of Ono." Okay, everybody say this word with me, right? The plain of Ono, right? Let's say it one more time. On the plain of oh no. Like, you hear what's happening, right? They're meeting on the plain of oh no. Like, don't go. Don't do this thing, right? You know, I don't know about you guys, but Nehemiah gets invited to this place called Ono, the plain of Ono. And one of the things that Nehemiah is faced with at the end of this construction era was that his enemies, the enemies of God, were calling him to this place away from the work that he was trying to do. If you're taking notes this morning, the very first thing that I want you to write down is that the enemy will try and prevent you from completing what you started because he's simply trying to distract you. The enemy will try everything he can to distract you from accomplishing the God-sized dream and purpose that he's put in front of you. Nehemiah's enemies see him fulfilling this God-sized mission, and they say, let's hatch a plan, right? Let's distract him. Nehemiah, come meet with us on the plain of Ono, right? Come on. The plain of Ono, just so you know, is a real place. It's about 20 miles north of Jerusalem. And the plain of Ono was this gorgeous, lush valley. It was a beautiful place to go and hang out. And so Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, they're like, how do we get Nehemiah to stop doing what he's doing? Let's call him away to like a retreat center. Let's call him away to a resort. Let's get him to go sit under a date palm and like we can hang some hammocks and get him some, frilly drinks with, straws and umbrellas in it, right? But we don't do straws anymore. So let's just get him a frilly drink with an umbrella in it. And that's what they're trying to do. They're saying, come on, Nehemiah, come down over here. Like, actually come up to the plain of Ono and hang out with us for a while. You need a break. You've been working so hard. I know we've had our beef, but come on, man. Let's chill together. Have you guys ever had a situation where, like, you're working hard, you're close to finishing something important, and then all of a sudden, at the very last minute, oh no, something gets put into your life? For example, some of you would say, I've made it my goal to lose about 20 pounds. I want to be healthy and strong again. I'm going to start eating clean, right? And you've made progress. You only have 5 pounds left to go, and you and your family are going out to dinner that night. And you said in your mind, you're like, I'm doing the salad tonight, right? Like, I'm going to do the salad, no dressing, skip the cheese. It's just going to be like things that a rabbit would eat, okay? That's it. And you walk into that restaurant, and what do you see? It's all you can eat taco night. And you're like, oh no, it's the tacos. They're coming for you, right? It's like tacos are my kryptonite. Chips and salsa, my kryptonite. Like, everything else stops when there's a bowl of chips and salsa on the table. I have to actually physically remind myself, dinner's coming after this, Peter. Like, slow your roll, kid, right? Like, invited to the plain of Ono. Looks like tacos. For some of you, you've said this fall, I want to drive a stake in the ground. I've made the decision that I'm going to be the spiritual leader in my family. Like, I'm going to bring my family to church every weekend. Through Christmas, we're going to commit to this. We're going to grow together. And then you get the kids' soccer schedule. Oh, no! Every practice is on Sunday morning, right? And you are being distracted, and there's something that is drawing you away from what God has called you to. See, the closer you get to the finish line, the harder the enemy will fight to stop you. And honestly, I know we've had some fun with this, but I wonder how many of you could actually identify what the plain of oh no looks like in your world. Like, what are those things that maybe it is a physical place, or maybe it's a thing, maybe it's something you like to do, and it's a distraction. You're tempted to go visit the plain of Ono in your life. I wonder if you could figure out what that is. But look at how Nehemiah responds to the invitation to come and withdraw in verse 3. He says, but they were scheming to harm me. So I sent messengers to them with this reply. I'm carrying on a great project, and I cannot go down. Why should the work stop while I leave it and go down to you? This is powerful. I don't know if you see this. He doesn't use this word, but this is exactly what he's saying. He says, no. Why should I leave what I'm doing? In this situation, no may be one of the most godly things that you could possibly say. See, when God's called you to serve him, when God's broken your heart for something, and he's put you on that mission, one of the most godly things that you can say in your life is no. See, when you're focused on your mission, the enemy comes and he's crying out. He's like, hey, come on up to Ono. Whatever Ono looks for you, your reply with all your heart, with all your passion, with all your courage that you can muster up is, no way, man. I'm on a mission. I can't leave this great project. I can't come down. Why would I do that to go be with you so that the work can stop? I'm laser focused. Like, I refuse to be distracted by you. This is a spiritual discipline. Learning how to say no to oh no. Some of us need to put this into practice. You may even need to do this today. Say no to oh no. Saying no to some things, those temptations that distract you from doing what God has placed on your heart, on your life to do. The big, great, God-sized calling that only you can do in this world. You have to say no. You have to learn to say no. Because there are things that will compete with what God wants to do in your world and in your life. Even good things. Even some good things. Listen, just because you could do something doesn't mean that you should do something. You have to just work your way through the distractions because the enemy will try to distract you. Your spiritual enemy, he specializes in distraction, and he wants to pull you away from anything that God has called you to. But Nehemiah refuses to lose focus. Nehemiah, he says, I am on a great project. I'm not coming down. I wonder, what is that great project for you? See, for me, I've identified three things in my life that I'm like, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to set my life after these things. That at the end of my life, that when people are gathering in a room similar to this and they're talking about me and I'm not actually here anymore, these are the things that they're going to talk about. I'm hoping. These are my goals. These are the great projects that I've been called to. And what I've realized is that in order to pour energy into that, in order to see those things grow and expand, I have to learn how to say no. In fact, I've had to learn how to say no way more than I ever thought I was going to have to say. And the first thing for me is very obvious. The first thing is I want to have a thriving marriage. I want my wife Tiffany and I to be more in love at the end of our days than we are even today. Like, I want to know that we have lived an incredible life together. Last weekend, we got invited out on a Sunday night to go and hang out with some friends, and they texted us late Sunday afternoon and said, hey, why don't you guys come over? We'd love to do something together. And I had to say no to a couple that we'd love to hang out with, to do something we would have really enjoyed. But I had to say no because that entire week before that, I was out every single night, every night. And it was Saturday evening. I looked at Tiffany and I said, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what happens tomorrow, we're not doing it. I looked at the kids and I said, no play dates. You're not going anywhere. I don't care who invites you to go wherever. The answer is no. Don't even think about it because we just have to be together. And then on that Sunday, I was like, I want to, but I can't. So we had to say no. The second thing that I know for me, the great calling on my life is to be an engaged dad. I don't just want to be a parent. I want to be an engaged dad in my kids' lives. I've got 3 kids, Noah, Grace, and Leah, and they are rapidly getting older. They are rapidly marching towards that graduation day, and woohoo, that's going to be exciting. But at the same time, like I match that excitement with the reality of these are 3 lives that God has put into my own life, that I get to impact their life for a small time. And nobody else can be their dad. I am the only human being on this planet that can hold that title. Yes, there are men that I'm so grateful for that pour their energy into investing into my kids. But God has brought those kids into my life, and I have to be engaged in their life. And so that means that sometimes I have to say no to doing things that I want to do. I'm an avid spear fisherman. I love to spearfish. But guess what? Some days when I'm like, the tide is right, the current is right, it's clear, there's no red tide, like this, let's get out there. I can't do it because I know that I need to be engaged with my kids and home and present when they're there. The third thing that I know for my own life is that I want to be a faithful pastor to this church. That God has placed on my heart a love for Hope City Church. like a love for this church like I've not experienced for any other church that I've worked for in my career to this date. See, I want you to know something. You come after my wife, Tiffany, and you come after my kids, for sure. But I love being your pastor. I love praying for you. I love living life together. I love teaching and preaching. Like, these are the passions of my life. I love leading this church. And I know that at the end of my life, this is the great work that God's put in front of me. And this is what it means, that there are going to be days when I have to say no to certain things that I want to do, so that way I can be faithfully serving our church, faithfully loving my wife, faithfully leading my family. What is the great project? What is that great mission that God has put on your life? What is that great burden that God has broken your heart for? And it does not matter. If you look at me and you say, Peter, I have lived for 55, 65, 75 years of my life without focusing on that mission. Today is the day that you can start focusing, laser focus on that mission. If you have a pulse, you have a purpose. If you have a pulse, so long as your heart is still pushing blood through your body, there is something for you to do. God has not left you here on this planet just to kind of tick off the days. There is a plan for your life, and you can actively live that out. But guess what? The enemy of God would love nothing more than to distract you from being fully engaged with what God has called you to. Look at Nehemiah chapter 6, verse 3 and 4. Nehemiah actually says, again, I'm going on this great project and I can't come down. Why should the work stop while I'm with you? He says 4 times they sent to me the same message, and each time I gave them the same answer. See, if you want to build something great for God, a great marriage, a great ministry, a great family, you have to be laser focused on your mission and learn to stay focused in the midst of distraction. Some of you need to internalize even just that. See, if your enemy can't distract you, he'll move on to a second tactic that he applies to Nehemiah. And the story goes on in verse 5. It says this: the 5th time, Sanballat sent his aide to me with the same message, and in his hand was an unsealed letter, meaning anybody could have read it up until this point in time, in which it was written, it's reported among the nations, and Geshem says it's true, which means that's basically like saying, well, I saw it on the internet. And so that means that you and the Jews are plotting to revolt, and therefore you're building the wall. Moreover, according to these reports, you are about to become their king, and have even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. There's a king in Judah. Now this report will get back to the king. So come, let's meet together. You see what's going on here? These guys have set up a smear campaign against Nehemiah. If they couldn't distract him, then guess what? They said, we're going to discredit him. And so if you can't be distracted, the enemy will do everything he can to discredit you. To make sure that everybody thinks that something isn't true about you. This happened with Chip and Joanna Gaines all the time, like especially towards the end of their career there with Fixer Upper. I don't know if you'll remember checking out at Target, Publix, you could see all of the tabloids. It was like every other week, every clickbait on Facebook. It was, what happened? What is Joanna's new secret project that Chip doesn't even know about? What they don't want you to know about their marriage, right? And what's going on with their kids and this, that, and the other thing. Guess what? None of it was true. Why is this happening? Because Chip and Joanna are serious about their Christian faith. They are unrelenting about their Christian faith on national television every week. And there is nothing that the enemy wanted more than to distract or discredit this couple from the work that they were doing, from the witness that they were. So you look back at Nehemiah and look at what happens in verse 6 through 7. It says, the reports have come that you're about to become their king, and you've even appointed prophets to make this proclamation about you in Jerusalem. He says, by the way, don't you have a king already? What he's trying to do is he's threatening this guy. He's threatening Nehemiah that I'm going to spread rumors that you're trying to throw a revolt. You're trying to build a wall. You're trying to set up power and make a play at the financial institution of Jerusalem. These guys are out for blood, and they're going to do anything they can to distract him. Have you ever had people whisper about you? Like, have you ever had somebody say something that just isn't true about you? It is one of the most painful things. One of the most painful moments of life is when people start talking about your character, when they start calling your character into question, and they start whispering negative things about you, even right in the midst and very often during what God has called you to do. It is heartbreaking. It's almost soul-crushing, where you're like, why am I even bothering? Like, if everybody's just going to say this about me, it's not even worth it. Right? And this is exactly what they're trying to do to Nehemiah. If we can't distract him, let's beat him down to where he can't go forward any longer. Well, Nehemiah has a response for this too. And he says just like this, and we could learn from this. Nehemiah says, nothing like what you're saying is happening. You're just making this up out of your head, right? Basically, he's saying, translation, modern day translation is, that's a whole lot of fake news, okay? Like, can't we just move on? This doesn't even make sense. You're making it up off the top of your head. And then what Nehemiah does is amazing. He prays and gets right back to work. Verse 9 says, they're all trying to frighten us. He's saying this is so clear to him. They're just trying to frighten us, thinking their hands will get too weak for the work and it will not be completed. See, Nehemiah knew what was happening. He knew what was going on. He could understand the social dynamics, and sometimes you and I would do we would do better for ourselves if we would lean in and say, wait a second, I see what's happening here. It's not actually about me. It's about what God wants to do through me. It's about that person. It's about what's happening outside of just my context. See, if God-given dreams are going to move beyond our good intentions, what do we need to do? How do we take this next step when people want to discourage you, when they want to distract you and discredit you? We need to follow in the steps of Nehemiah. And Nehemiah showed us by flexing his spiritual muscle. Too often, we just want to roll up our sleeves and we don't want to flex a physical muscle. When we're distracted by others or discredited, we roll the sleeves up and we're like, let me show you how strong I am. Let me show you what I can do to you. I can discredit you. I can distract you. But Nehemiah says, no, there's another way around this. Look at verse 9, what he did. He said, but I prayed, now strengthen my hands. He flexed his spiritual muscle. He just leaned in and he said, God, this is yours. Now strengthen my hands. See, too often we pray and we want to say things like, God, strengthen my fists. God, sharpen my tongue. Because, man, I'm going to give a beat down. I'm going to give a verbal tongue lashing that person has not seen to this point in time that they've lived, right? I'm going to give them something like they've never experienced before. But Nehemiah goes the opposite direction. He flexes his spiritual muscle. He again returns to the Lord in prayer, and he says, God, keep me on task, keep me on point, help me stay laser focused to the great work that you've called me to, and strengthen my hands. Enable me to do the work that you've put in front of me. See, when you're faced with something that's trying to prevent you from accomplishing what God wants to do through you, you have to flex your spiritual muscle. And that starts with something as simple as engaging discernment. Discernment is what Nehemiah is showing us from the very beginning. It's understanding what's happening around him. Discernment not only means distinguishing right from wrong, like shouldn't probably steal, shouldn't probably kill, all that kind of stuff. But discernment is actually distinguishing good from better and better from best. It's understanding what should I do, what is the best thing for me to do. It took discernment for Nehemiah to say no to Ono. He knew a little time in paradise. Yeah, it may not hurt, but it's not going to push the mission forward. He knew that a time in paradise was actually going to distract from the mission that God had him on. A little time in paradise, a little time in the resort, a little time at the bar, whatever, it will distract and pull you away from what God has called you to. And discernment is what you and I need in order to finish what we've started. Maybe God has got you on a mission to care for the poor and the needy. And let me tell you, you better believe that you're going to require discernment in order to do that. Why? Because you can't just throw money at problems. And you actually have to hear through the story. You have to hear through what is happening in order to say, how can I best help this person right now? Where do you need to be more discerning? In your own life, the things that you've started, in order to finish them, where do you need to become more discerning? The next step in flexing your spiritual muscle is actually determining what needs to be done. It's one thing to understand the difference between right and wrong and kind of apply discernment about what's good, better, and best. But the next thing you need to do is be able to say, what is this next step for me? Determine what needs to be done. See, when God convicts a person with a God-sized dream, it's got to move beyond good intentions. And the best way to move something beyond good intentions is actually to take steps in doing it. See, God honors determination. God will honor your determination. Nothing will minimize your commitment to this goal, right? When you set your determination and you say, this is my next step, God will honor that and move alongside of you. Pray just as Nehemiah did. God, would you strengthen my hands? Strengthen my hands, Lord. Nehemiah had a spine of steel. There was no swaying him to the left or to the right. He was focused on honoring God by rebuilding this wall. I came here to finish a job, and I'm going to do everything I can to do that. But let me ask you, can you say that about your cause? Can you say that about the thing that breaks your heart? Can you say that without wavering, without question, saying, this is the cause of my life. This is my great project, and I will not be distracted. See, for the people God's calling you to fight for, maybe that's, I'm not giving up on this marriage. I'm not going to give up on my kids. I'm not giving up on defeating my addiction. I'm not giving up on my business. I'm not coming down, and I'm not giving up. There's no quit in me. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead is inside of me, is inside of you, and you can be saying that, you can be believing that, and taking that to the task that you've got in front of you. See, Satan couldn't keep Jesus down, and I'm not going to give up either, right? I'm going to stay on this wall, and I'm going to fight to the finish. And this applies to Nehemiah building a wall around Jerusalem just as much as it applies to the thing that God has burdened your heart for. The thing that when you look out in this world and you say, man, somebody's got to do something about that. Somebody's got to fix that issue. God wants to be in the midst of that, and he's called you to that. If he's broken your heart in that, follow it through. Finish well. See, the very end of this story is amazing. In verse 15, it says that the wall was completed on the 25th of Elul in 52 days. When all of our enemies heard about this, all the surrounding nations, they were afraid. They lost their self-confidence because they realized that this work had been done with the help of our God. In other words, the enemies knew that this wasn't Nehemiah building a wall. This was God working through a man to accomplish an incredible task. This was God working through women to accomplish an incredible task. This was God transforming a community from within a community. God used a whole community of people to rebuild and restore and see a community in a fixer-upper state go to this incredible finished product. Why? For God's glory. Imagine what God could do through you when you stay committed and focused to the finish line, when you fight to the finish, when you push all the way to the end. Let me ask you one last question in this series. What is God calling you to finish? I know I got to go home and do some sheetrock. My wife's calling me to finish that. But what is God calling you to finish? What is that task? What is that thing? What is that experience that breaks your heart? What is God calling you to finish? Set your eyes, set your mind on that. Let me encourage you with this as we close this series. One of the things that I love about the book of Nehemiah is, yes, it's all about a story of one man, but it is about a story of one man who had an entire community surrounding him. Nehemiah, don't kid yourself, Nehemiah did not build this wall all on his own. In fact, he had perfumers and goldsmiths, religious leaders, farmers, bakers, and every kind of other person working alongside of him in connection with one another. One of the greatest things about being a Christian, about living this Christian life, is that nowhere does it say that you're going to do this alone. In fact, it says the exact opposite. Jesus says, I'm never going to leave you. I'm never going to forsake you. You're never going to be all on your own. In fact, I've put you into these little communities called churches, and I want you to live in community together for the mission that I've called you to. And see, at Hope City, we celebrate that. This is one of those things that is just core to who we are, is we believe that the thing that God's put in front of you, we should link arms. We should be in community and in connection with one another. If God's put a dream on your heart, if God's breaking your heart for something, if you are laser focused on what God's called you to, I'm going to say it this way. You need people around you. You actually need other men, other women in your life encouraging you, high-fiving you, holding your arms up when they get tired, and supporting you. This is why at Hope City we love connect groups. We love connect groups because we know that the most meaningful time in life is when you are meaningfully connected to God and to others. The most meaningful time in your life is when you are meaningfully connected to God and to others. And so we've created this opportunity for you today to get into a connect group, to sign up for a connect group that's going to start in a week from today. And we know that you aren't meant to live life on your own. We're kicking off this next semester of connect groups. Semester, that's true. It means that it has a definitive end date. You're not kind of signing your life away. But I want you to get into a group. You're not meant to do this by yourself. You're not meant to have to withstand the weight of the world. You're not meant to have to withstand the brokenness of whatever God has broken your heart for. We want to help you. We want to prop you up. We want to have people that link arms with you. Imagine what you could do with others around you. Imagine what God could do with the dream that He's placed on your life. Imagine what it would look like to fight all the way to the finish. In a few moments, I want you to go outside, and there's going to be connect group leaders out there that would love to talk with you, and you can find a group. They're on the back side of the notes. I printed them there for you as well. But I want you to remember this. It's easy to start, but it's hard to finish. Let us love our community. Let's serve together. And let's lock arms in connect groups to see the mission of God break loose here in Sarasota.